Good morning and welcome back to Workshop Wisdom with BikeSocial. I'm Jim Lindsay. Last time we spoke about the checks you need to make to the bike before you ride it. One of the things we looked at was the chain, which on my KTM was filthy and loose. Shame on me. So today we're going to talk about how you adjust it, clean it, and why it's important to keep it in tip-top condition. A roller chain like this is a pretty astonishing bit of kit. In terms of mechanical efficiency, it's got a rate of 98%. That means that the transmission loss in the chain itself is only 2%. So if I've got 100 horsepower coming out here, I'm going to get 98 horsepower here. That's, of course, under ideal conditions. Ideal conditions, unfortunately, mean enclosed, in an oil bath, running at a constant speed. None of these things apply to a motorcycle chain, but you can get pretty close to it. Okay, before I start work on the bike, I'm going to just make sure it can't move. I'm going to just put a cable tie around the front brake lever, pull it tight, and there we go, nice and solid. I learned the hard way about this. I had a bike slip off the bench and the front wheel landed on my chest. Not the greatest experience I've ever had, really, so best to be safe. On every motorcycle you'll come across, the engine sprocket is higher than the rear wheel sprocket. What this means is that as the suspension compresses, the rear wheel sprocket moves further away from the engine sprocket, which has the effect of tightening the chain. Most of the chains I look at that are badly adjusted are too tight rather than too loose. Why does this matter? Well, a number of reasons. The first one is that it affects the ride on the bike. You've got the suspension unit here. As the suspension is compressing, it's absorbing the shock from the road and it's compressing. If the chain's too tight, the chain tries to pull the rear suspension unit in the opposite direction. So it's got one force trying to push it up and another force trying to pull it back down. That can upset the handling quite severely. That's the first reason. Second reason is that it puts strain on the bearings in the gearbox, in the back wheel, and it also will strain the chain itself. The rollers and the bushes will be subject to much greater pressures than normal and they'll wear much faster as a result. The best way to check whether the chain is worn or not is to grasp hold of it, the back sprocket like this, and try and pull it away from the sprocket teeth. If the pins and the bushes inside the chain are worn, what you'll see is it'll pull away from the sprocket and expose some of the teeth. That means that the chain's had it and it's time to be replacing. But if it doesn't, as is the case of this one, and should be because I only put it on there about 3,000 miles ago, you can see it's not pulling away at all. Absolutely fine. We can go along and check the adjustment. Having checked that the chain isn't worn, the next thing to do is check the tension. Consult your owner's handbook that you get with the bike to see what the setting should be. Generally it's between 25 and 30 millimeters of slack at the longest run on the chain in the midpoint. So that's what it is in terms of the KTM. So let's just have a look. Well, I can tell without even measuring it that that's more than 25 millimeters. It's pretty grim. After a while you'll get the hang of this and you won't need a measure, but you can always just use a ruler if you want and position the ruler in the longest run of the chain and then just measure the distance that the chain moves when it's slack. Right, that's the theory over. Time to get your hands dirty. Or not in my case, because I like to wear nitrile gloves. You know, I've always wanted to be a customs officer. Okay, here's another handy tip. Whatever you're doing, make yourself as comfortable as possible. You'll do better work and you'll get less tired. I use a stool. If you're very short or you're a contortionist, you can ignore that advice. Time to clean the chain. This is what I use. There are all sorts of things on there. I like this though because it evaporates as you put it on, so it's quite easy to use. Nice powerful aerosol. Get it all into the side plates. Then a nice lint-free rag. Wipe it off. Rotate the chain. Get to the next bit. Make sure as well that you get right into the back of the chain. Don't just do the links you can see, do the ones you can't see as well. Okay, time to start adjustment. This is one of my favourite tools. It's a snap-on half-inch ratchet. It's the same age as me. My father-in-law brought it in 1954, the year I was born. It lasted him out and it'll probably last me out as well, although they do have a lifetime guarantee. First off, we need to slacken off the rear wheel nut. Good and loose, so you can adjust easily without fighting against the tension of the nut. And with the wheel nut slack, now I have to slacken off the adjusters. So there's a lock nut, just get the spanner on there, tweak it out, that's it. And you do the same on the other side. Everything's slack, all the lock nuts are undone, so now we're going to adjust. So I'll just do it one flat of the nut at a time. I reckon it's going to take 2 or 3 probably. So there's 3 flats of the nut. Done that on this side, and now I need to go around and do it on the other side. Nearly finished now. We've loosened everything off. We've adjusted the chain. We make sure the chain tension is round about right. One last thing, this is a tip from a GP mechanic. Slide a screwdriver between the chain and sprocket, turn the wheel backwards, and that will settle the adjuster blocks against the adjuster nuts, so you know everything's nice and snug. Just check the tension again. Then, if you're happy with everything, the last job is to check the wheel alignment. There are 2 ways of checking the alignment. Firstly, there are alignment marks on the adjuster block which correspond with alignment marks on the swinging arm, so you can make sure that those are both equal either side. If you want to be really finicky about it, which I normally am, I use a vernier caliper, and what I do with a vernier caliper is just take a measurement between the end of the swing arm and the adjuster block, and I then compare that to the reading taken in exactly the same position on the other side. And you can fiddle around for ages to get them within 0.01 of a millimetre, but as long as they're in with 0.1 of a millimetre of each other, that's near enough for me. Okay, and now it's time to get out my big tool. Teng torque wrench, excellent brand of tool, Teng. I use quite a lot of them. I need to set this, so I'm just winding the barrel up to 100 Newton meters, which is what the torque for the rear wheel axle nut is. That's set. We take the socket that we're using, 36mm in this case, and then tighten up until we hear the torque wrench click, like that. Again, because it's a nice noise, and that's it all done. If you've got a bike with a single sided swinging arm, like this Ducati 996 that I'm in the middle of rebuilding, the adjustment technique is slightly different in that the axle is mounted eccentrically in a rotating hub, and what you have to do is to slacken off the 2 bolts that clamp it down, and then you rotate the whole hub with a C-spanner, and that causes the wheel to move backwards or forwards in the swing arm itself, and so then that's how you make the adjustments. All the other details for cleaning and tension are exactly the same. I'm sure you can tell just by looking at me that I'm a man who likes the finer things in life. The tea I'm drinking I make a 70-mile round trip to get, summer and winter, and I'm very particular about how it's made as well. I'm also very particular about the lubes I use on the bike, and for the chain I use Silcoline Pro Chain chain lube. Other lubricants are available, but this is the one that I prefer. Okay, so to apply the lube, I tend to not do it on the back sprocket, I do it on the bottom rung, and I hold a piece of rag behind the chain to keep the lube off the tyre, because you certainly don't want it there, and spray along, get the inside links and the outside links and the rollers and the side plates, rub it all in, move the chain around, and then do the next section. It'll be very drippy to start with. That's because the lubricant is held in suspension, and the fluid that holds it in suspension eventually evaporates, leaving with a nice sticky lube on the chain. Okay, so that's the chain cleaned, adjusted, lubricated, and now it's time to take the bike for a little trip. But first of all, after all that tea, I need to take a little trip myself to the boys' room, so excuse me.